All right, get ready because today we're diving deep into time travel. We've got some articles, scientific discussions, and even some fun pop culture stuff to look at.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, should be a fun one. But the big question is, could we actually, bend time to our will?
Well, science fiction writers have definitely explored that idea a lot. I mean, from H.G. Wells all the way to Back to the Future, it seems like everyone's got an idea for a time machine.
Yeah, and those stories, right, they often explore things like changing the past or maybe getting a glimpse of the future.
Right.
But what does actual science say about all this? Like, what do physicists think about whether time travel is even possible?
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting. See, before Einstein came along, everyone thought time was this absolute thing. It just never changed.
Yeah, yeah.
But his theories of relativity, well, they kind of blew that idea out of the water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they showed that time is actually relative, meaning it can speed up or slow down
Wow.
depending on how fast you're moving or the strength of the gravity around you.
So time isn't the same for everyone everywhere. Hold on. Are you saying that time travel to the future is already happening?
In a way, yeah. Think about those astronauts up on the International Space Station. They're orbiting Earth super fast, and because of that, they actually age a tiny bit slower than us down here.
No way.
It's true. It's not enough that you'd notice it in everyday life, but it's measurable.
Wow.
And the crazy part is, this effect, well, it could theoretically be scaled up. Imagine, like, a spaceship going almost the speed of light. The astronauts on board, they could come back to Earth years younger than their own, like twin siblings.
That's insane. Okay, so traveling to the future, while still pretty far out there, is at least based on real science.
Right.
But what about going back in time? That's where we get into all those crazy paradoxes, right?
You got it. Going back to the past, well, that's where things get a lot more tricky and maybe even impossible.
I see.
One of the biggest roadblocks is the grandfather paradox, right? If you go back in time and stop your grandparents from meeting, well, how could you even exist to go back in time in the first place?
Yeah, that's a tough one.
There are some theoretical solutions to this, like the idea of a multiverse where every decision creates a whole new parallel universe. But even that leads to a whole bunch of new questions and problems.
Right, right.
Yeah,
So even if going back in time were physically possible, there's some pretty big logical hurdles to get over.
for sure.
Are there any scientific concepts that could even allow for backward time travel, like at least in theory?
Well, there are a couple of ideas that scientists throw around. One is the concept of closed time-like curves, or CTCs for short.
Okay.
Picture like a loop in space-time that could let you revisit a moment in your own past.
Okay.
The problem is these CTCs are super theoretical,
Uh-huh.
and they would need some conditions that we just don't fully understand yet.
Our sources also mention wormholes, those shortcuts through space-time that pop up in science fiction all the time.
Oh yeah, wormholes are another cool possibility. They're
Mhm.
like tunnels that connect different points in space-time.
Right.
And if we could somehow make them or control them, we might be able to travel super far or even through time.
Yeah.
But here's the catch. They'd need this stuff called exotic matter with negative energy density just to stay open.
Ah,
And we haven't even proven that something like that exists.
wow.
So while it's fun to think about a stable wormhole for time travel, that's still definitely science fiction for now.
Okay, so CTCs and wormholes, those are long shots. What about cosmic strings? I remember that term from our research.
Ah, yeah, cosmic strings. They're these hypothetical things, super dense leftovers from the Big Bang.
Right.
Some physicists think they could be so massive that they actually warp space-time enough to, like, make the distortion needed for time travel.
Hmm.
Imagine, like, a cosmic strain curving back on itself. You might be able to follow that curve and end up back in your own past.
Wow. Okay.
But just like wormholes, whether cosmic strings even exist is still up for debate, and we're a long way from proving they could be used for time travel.
Well, lots of interesting ideas, but nothing concrete. I gotta admit, it's a bit of a bummer. But then again, maybe it's for the best. Think about the chaos. If anyone could just jump around in time,
Yeah, that's true.
that's something to think about.
Definitely.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's take a break there and come back and explore some of the other ideas in just a bit.
Sounds good.
Right. It's crazy to think that something like time, something so basic could be so complex and mysterious.
It really is.
Yeah. We've talked about the scientific theories, but how does science fiction deal with the potential consequences of messing with time?
Well, a big theme that comes up a lot is the idea of, like, unintended consequences.
Right.
Even small changes to the past can have ripple effects and, like, totally change the present.
Oh yeah, like the butterfly effect, right?
Exactly. That idea that something small, like a butterfly flapping its wings, could end up causing a hurricane on the other side of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. So even if we could go back and change things, make things better, we might just end up making things worse.
You could definitely mess things up.
Like that old saying, be careful what you wish for, right?
Exactly.
But some science fiction stories talk about using time travel to fix mistakes or stop disasters from happening. Is there any science behind that idea? Like, could that actually be possible?
That's a tough one. Changing the past is a really appealing idea, but it also brings up a lot of logical and philosophical problems.
Okay, I see.
Like, if you went back and stopped a tragedy from happening, would that mean the people who, were affected in the original timeline never even existed?
Right.
What would that mean for their families, their kids, even for, reality itself?
Yeah, that's a lot to think about.
It gets really complicated really fast.
It's almost like the universe has a way of stopping us from messing with the timeline too much.
Right.
Speaking of, you mentioned the multiverse theory earlier.
Uh-huh.
How does that idea fit in with time travel?
Well, the multiverse theory, the idea that there are a ton of parallel universes out there, it offers a possible solution to some of those time travel paradoxes.
Okay.
If every decision creates a new, branch of reality, then going back in time wouldn't necessarily change your past.
Hmm.
It would just create a new timeline where those changes happened.
Interesting.
So you wouldn't be erasing yourself by stopping your grandparents from meeting. You'd be creating a whole separate reality where that never happened.
Okay, so instead of time being a straight line, maybe it's more like a tree with infinite branches.
That's a good way to think about it.
Yeah, that's pretty mind-blowing.
It is, right.
But even with a multiverse, wouldn't there still be, ethical stuff to think about? If you create a new timeline, aren't you responsible for what happens there?
Oh, absolutely. The ethics of time travel are huge no matter what theory you're looking at.
Yeah.
Even if you're not changing your past directly, you're still potentially affecting countless lives.
Wow.
It's a level of responsibility that's almost impossible to grab.
It makes you wonder if maybe, humanity just isn't ready for time travel.
Yeah, maybe not.
But let's change gears for a sec. We've been talking about the big theoretical stuff.
Right?
But are there any actual experiments or research projects going on that are trying to, manipulate time?
Well, no one's building time machines just yet,
Right.
but there are scientists doing some really cool experiments that could help us understand time better
Okay.
and maybe figure out if we can manipulate it.
Like what?
One area that's really interesting is quantum entanglement. It's this weird thing where two particles get linked together no matter how far apart they are.
Huh.
If you change one particle, the other one changes instantly, even if they're light years away.
Wow, that sounds like science fiction.
Right? It's almost like they're communicating faster than the speed of light, which shouldn't be possible.
Yeah.
So some physicists think this instant connection could be a key to understanding how information might travel through time.
So, sending messages to the past or receiving information from the future?
Yeah.
That's wild.
It's mind-blowing, right? Even if entanglement doesn't lead to actual time travel, studying it could teach us a lot about time and how it works in the universe.
Okay, so entanglement is something I need to read up on for sure.
Definitely.
What other research is going on?
Well, scientists are also looking into those closed time-like curves, those theoretical loops in space-time we talked about before.
Right.
We can't actually create one yet, but physicists are using math and computer simulations to study them.
Okay.
They want to see if there's any way to use them for time travel. It's super theoretical stuff,
Yeah.
but it's pushing the boundaries of what we know and making us rethink what's possible.
It's amazing that even something like time can be, cutting-edge research.
It is, isn't it?
But with all this talk about paradoxes and epics, has anyone ever actually claimed to have time traveled?
There have been lots of stories and supposed sightings,
Yeah.
but none of them have been scientifically proven.
Right.
Stephen Hawking even had a party for time travelers once.
What?
Yeah, he didn't send out the invitations until after the party.
Oh, clever.
The idea was that if anyone from the future could time travel, they could come to the party.
I love it.
But nobody showed up.
Oh, bummer. I would have totally crashed that party.
Me too. But I guess it's not that surprising. If time travel were easy, we'd probably be seeing time tourists all over the place.
Right. That's a good point.
Some physicists think there might be something called a chronology protection conjecture, which basically means the laws of physics might stop big things like people from traveling back in time, maybe to prevent those paradoxes or keep the timeline from falling apart.
Interesting. But like a lot of things with time travel, it's still just a theory.
It-
So for now, time travel is still mostly in our imaginations.
It seems that way.
But even if we never figure out how to actually travel through time, thinking about it can make us understand the universe better.
Definitely. It challenges us to think differently about reality.
It does.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've talked a lot about time travel in theory. Next, let's explore what it could actually mean for us, even if we can't hop in a time machine just yet.
Sounds good.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit here and talk about what time travel might actually mean for us, even if we can't, hop into a time machine just yet.
Okay.
It's fun to imagine the possibilities, but are there any like practical implications we can explore right now?
Well, one thing that's always really gotten me thinking is how time travel makes us rethink history, you know? Like, if the past can be changed, does that mean history itself isn't as reliable?
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. We tend to think of history as this set in stone thing.
Right, exactly.
But what if it's like more fluid than we think?
Exactly. Even without actual time travel, we know that history is, constantly being reinterpreted as we get new evidence and perspectives change.
Yeah.
And imagine how much more complex that gets if someone could go back and actually change things.
It makes you wonder if we can ever really know what happened in the past, for sure.
Right.
But, beyond history, I'm also curious about the personal implications of time travel. Like, if you could go back in time, would you be tempted to relive a special moment or maybe even try to make some mistake?
Oh, for sure. The pull of the past is strong, but it does raise some ethical questions.
Yeah.
Like, is it okay to interfere with someone else's timeline, even if you mean well?
And what about the future? Would you want to know what's coming, even if it meant spoiling the surprise? I think I might be too curious.
Knowing the future would be, well, it would be tempting, but it could also take away the excitement of, not knowing what's going to happen.
That's true.
And what if you saw something bad? Would you spend your whole life trying to avoid it?
Yeah, you'd be living in fear almost.
Right.
That's a really good point. Maybe it's better not to know.
Maybe so.
But all this talk about time travel, it makes me wonder, what is time? Really, we measure it with clocks and calendars, but is there more to it than that?
You've hit on a huge question there, like one of the biggest mysteries in physics and philosophy.
Yeah,
Some theories say that time isn't actually a fundamental part of reality, but rather it's something that emerges from something more complex.
okay.
Like our brains are wired to experience time in a linear way, but what if that's just a limitation of how we perceive things?
So maybe there's a bigger picture of time where past, present, and future aren't so separate after all.
Exactly. Some physicists even think the universe might exist in higher dimensions, and all moments in time are happening at the same time.
Whoa.
It's a hard concept to wrap your head around, but
Yeah.
it opens up some pretty wild possibilities.
So instead of traveling through time, maybe we just need to change our perspective and tap into different points in this massive cosmic web.
I like that, a cosmic web. And who knows, maybe that's what, ancient mystics and spiritual traditions were talking about when they talked about, transcending time and experiencing eternity.
Hmm.
Perhaps there's a deeper connection between science and spirituality than we realize.
Okay, well, we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about the science of time travel, the paradoxes, the ethical issues, even the philosophy of it all.
Definitely a lot to think about.
What are some key takeaways you'd want our listener to ponder?
I think the biggest one is that time is just way more complex and mysterious than we usually think about it.
Yeah.
And even if we never actually build a time machine, just exploring these ideas can help us understand the universe and our place in it a little bit better.
It's definitely been a mind-bending journey for me.
For me too.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll look back on this conversation from a completely different point in time with a whole new understanding of it all.
That would be something else, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
But for now, let's enjoy the mystery and keep exploring these ideas, with science and imagination.
I like that. And on that note, we'd like to thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of time travel. We hope you enjoyed the ride.
Thanks for listening, everyone.